For 24 years, I taught grades 4 through 6, and of course, one of the subjects was social studies. We all had this big social studies book, and even youngsters who had great difficulty in reading couldn't begin to read that social studies book. It was, for the most part, fairly boring. It was simply facts. So the thing that I tried to do was lay the book aside and pick up stories, because history is stories, history is people. Pick up stories that would resonate with the children, and they would remember them, and they might remember when they happened and have a greater appreciation for history. Back in the early 60s, the U.S. government allotted tremendous amounts of money to establish school libraries all over the country. And I had a principal who said, well, Nancy, you like books, so you set up the libraries. Well, I didn't know very much about it at that time, so I went back to school to learn. At the same time, set up 15 libraries in 15 elementary schools in the school district. And once they were set up, I thought, wonderful, everybody's going to come. Nobody wanted to use them. Nobody knew what to do with them. So I thought, well, it's time to write. So I started writing books about what do you do when you have a great school library? How do you use it? And of course, one thing leads to another. So I did lots and lots of books on how to use school libraries, better ideas and techniques for the classroom. And of course, that led to Children and Books. And as a children's literature teacher at Lindenwood University, it was natural to write for children. So one thing led to another, led to another, led to another. To strike that balance, whether you're writing for very young children, as I have done, or for older children, you really have to know, first of all, children's literature. I think it's so important. You need to know what has been written. You need to be well read in those areas to know what children love, to know what they understand, to know what they enjoy. So you come to writing from a child's viewpoint, knowing what their interests are and what they enjoy and the levels at which they can read. I've written for 2, 3, 4-year-olds, which is a whole different ball game, and actually is difficult sometimes as writing for older children and for older children. But again, when I do write for older children, it's based on what I know they like, what they enjoy, and what they're able to read. You know, after reading about Virginia Hall, and there's very little information out there about her, I began digging, and the more I dug, particularly all the wonderful information I got from the British archives, the more I learned about her, and the more I thought this woman has to be known to young people today. It's too bad that her history was buried somewhere and no one ever heard of it. So that was the purpose, really, for doing her book. Virginia Hall was the only woman to receive the Distinguished Service Cross. That's the nation's second highest honor. And yet no one's heard of her, or very few people have heard of her. I ran across Virginia Hall when I was researching another book. And I discovered she did all these amazing things as a spy in France, and yet received very little credit. In fact, when she received the medal, she did not want President Truman to give it to her because she said, you don't need a medal for doing the job you're expected to do. She was, as I said, an amazing woman. She had a wooden leg, which she lost in Turkey in a hunting accident. She was a clerk at the Turkish embassy, and that was as close as she ever came to being in the Foreign Service, which was her dream from a child. She wanted to be in the Foreign Service. She was turned down any number of times, and as I say, ended up in the Turkish embassy. She spent some time there, and then went to France because she thought she clerked enough, and that's when the war broke out. So she thought she was in an immediate position to help the United States. So she applied right away to the U.S. authorities, said, I know France, I know the language, I know the people, I'll do anything you want me to do. I can be very helpful to you here in France. And they said, sorry, we can't use you. Well, she was pretty angry about that, so she went to the British. They said, you bet. I don't think they really said you bet, but something like that. And they trained her in very rigorous training, the same training they would give any man. She went through it beautifully. As I say, spent 3 years in France and did a marvelous job as a spy. and fortunately was never caught. She came very close a few times, but was never caught. So her story is fascinating. I'm glad that I ran across her when I was looking for something else. You never know what will happen when you're researching. There's so many heroes from the various wars, and many, of course, from World War II. But very few people can remember the name of Virginia Hall as one of the greatest heroines of all the wars. Yet she did the job of a spy in World War II in France, being chased at just almost every moment by the Gestapo. And yet she had a wooden leg, which is almost unbelievable. She was turned down by the United States to help in World War II because of that wooden leg, and yet she first helped the British and then the United States, and did a marvelous, exceptional job. She should be remembered, as many women from these wars should be remembered. Virginia Hall's dream as a child was to become one of the Foreign Service. She reached that dream in a rather odd way by serving our country as a spy in World War II. I hope that young girls today will take a page from Virginia's book and reach their dreams by using perseverance, endurance, and sticking with the job as long as it needs to be done.